Good morning, traders. It is Thursday. It's the 12th of the 12th, and it is the UK election day today. We're going to jump into the DAX technical analysis in just a few moments. Before we proceed, trading financial markets is risky. It involves the risk of losing your invested money. So any decisions that you take on the markets will be your responsibility. We do not provide any financial advice. It's certainly not suitable for all investors. Okay, on the screen in front of us, we've got the futures chart, which is coming directly from the server at the moment. And we will start with that, and then we'll jump over to CFD. Okay. If the sound is coming through, just let me know. Just send me a message. That would be great. And let's get started. All right, so we've got an important day today. The UK obviously has its general election, which is very decisive for Brexit, which is going to have ramifications across the European markets. Polling stations are going to shut later on this evening. I think it might even be somewhere around 11 or midnight tonight. And there have been all different kinds of polls, exit polls and things like that will be happening throughout the day and prior to today. And the base case seems to be a Conservative victory, Tory victory, whatever your political bias is. If that doesn't suit, I appreciate that. But that just seems to be the general consensus at the moment. I think it's going to be closer than a lot of people expect. I think there was a lot of indications that it's going to be a runaway Conservative majority, but I don't know if that's going to be the case. But if Conservatives do win, of course it helps Prime Minister Johnson get his Brexit deal through Parliament before the new year. Well, before Christmas. So the UK can leave the EU on the 31st of January. There are lots of other things and factions and combinations and outcomes that could happen. But that seems to be the most likely scenario for the moment. Okay, no deal Brexit fears are obviously going to come back if the withdrawal agreement passes. And then there's going to be quite a lot of complicated negotiations on the relationship between the UK and the EU after that. All right, so that is the UK preview, and I'd imagine that all of our Forex trades are going to be pretty crazy today, on the pound pairs at least. So yeah, we're expecting quite a bit of movement. I remember when we had the Brexit vote a few years back, that when price was at 150, cable was at 150, and it just dumped all the way down to like 120 something. It was a crazy night. Thousands and thousands of pounds to be made on the markets. Crazy. Don't know if we're going to get that, but we'll see. Anyway, so that's Brexit and the UK elections. We've got the ECB's Lagarde, the new ECB president, making her debut when she is going to be announcing the monetary policy decision later on today, and there's going to be the press conference. So it's ECB Thursday, so be aware of that. I'd imagine that price action is going to create the majority of its movement in the early part of the session. It's actually already started this morning. We'll come back to that in a moment. And you'd imagine that today she's probably going to focus on the strategic review and keep things pretty simple. US-China trade talks and all the rest of that is still pretty much dominating the newswires. Yesterday there was a FOMC meeting, or it was last night in fact, where the Fed did not change its target interest rate. That's after 3 cuts in a row. And so we'll see what the dots are going to be like for that one. Now, moving over to the DAX, right now what we have is a situation whereby we've just broken above what would be the value area high, the composite December value area high, and I think we may have just actually broken to a new high for December. And yet we have. So that kind of creates a base case for me, which is around the idea that we have a skewed profile for this composite on December. Okay, the value area is within the top 40% of the profile, and we have below the value area, we've got this large section down here where price met with some significant demand and has reacted to that. So what I'm expecting to see happen now is a kind of normalization of this profile, whereby you start to see price action stretched up here, and it just creates a more normal neutral looking distribution. The value area may well stay in this zone, but you just start to see that the profile extends out a little bit. So if we start to see some momentum and price action just continues to grind its way higher, then that will of course happen, and the obvious target zones would be where we found supply towards the end of November. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. There's quite a lot of line sets out here. I know it gets a bit busy to look at, but just for now, I'm just going to be focusing on breaking above this value area high, breaking above this previous distribution range high, and then starting to expand higher into this supply zone and just pull that profile back to something a little bit more normal. Okay, jumping into it in a bit more detail. Price action from yesterday. This is a 4-minute chart on futures. It's the DAX mini chart. Slightly different to your CFD chart if you use CFD. And what I noticed is that on Tuesday, I think this is, when we had price action dump down into that demand zone and then create this kind of divergence down here, lower low on price, higher low on all sorts of things, on oscillators. This was delta, so you had this kind of ignition after this divergence. But as price continued, when we got into the late afternoon session, there was this here. There was a spike in volume right there, and on its own it didn't look particularly significant, and it wasn't really that significant until you get into yesterday and you see that there was another spike at a similar sort of zone. So this is an area that is definitely worth marking out on the chart. A lot of business and activity seem to want to happen in that particular spot. Chances are that what that is just dumping of positions. So you had an ignition here, and then you had the dump of positions right there. So between here and here, you had quite a large institutional investor potentially just dumping their position, making a decent profit, getting out of the market, happy days. Or you could say that perhaps there was an opportunity for people to begin adding to positions here, and then whilst they didn't manage to complete their trade in the afternoon and it ran away from them, they manipulated the price action around here, got price to dump back into their buy zone, and off they went again. So there's a couple of different cases here that we could look at. But that is a zone of interest for sure, and you can just see it on the volume. It makes more sense to look at the volume data on a futures chart, not a CFD chart. Futures is pretty much the underlying market. Okay. So profile from Tuesday was this one here, which we can see over yesterday's price action. And you'll notice it's quite a jagged profile. The value area covers 2/3 of the day. The point of control, which is this line here, was not hit. That has been left exposed as a naked VPOC, which will be a target for a future day if we manage to break back below this zone here. Keep that. I wanted to kind of keep it on the chart, but it does make it look pretty messy. But what we can see right now is that we've already occupied that point of control from yesterday. Let me just. Now the tick size is half a tick. That's fine. We've already occupied the point of control from yesterday. We've broken above the value area high from yesterday and the high of yesterday as well. You can see that the delta has just punched through the zero line with aggressive buying. Has been met with a little bit of supply, and we'll just start to see how momentum kicks off from this spot. Strategy might also offer some opportunities as well. Come back to that. But the pivot for today on futures is 118 and 13088. But what we really need to do, if we consider the case that we just talked about a moment ago, which is that price is going to pop up above the recent December highs and start expanding the profile to the upside, what are our targets that we could perhaps look at getting towards? And if we just take a look at the previous exposed points of control, really the most obvious one that's out there on the chart, in fact I think there are two. Yep, there are two, and they're at almost exactly the same spot. Right there. Okay, so mid-November when we had that 2000 and, oh, actually I want to say 2019 high, but I can't recall whether or not that was the 2019 high. Certainly the November high for the moment. Let's go with that. In order to challenge that November high, we really do need to get through this end of November horrible profile that we saw, and you know, we're inside the value area of it now, but we've got this higher volume area where there's likely going to be some supply. That's an obvious target zone if momentum continues, and the point of control that is exposed on futures is up here at, my mouse is sensitive enough to drop on the spot, there we go, 13,326. Right, okay, if that idea does not work out and in actual fact price just continues to reject in this zone, which it has done a couple of times already before, or perhaps it finds this previous point of control and value area zone from the day before that, where's my line, there we go, somewhere in there, you can see this one I'm circling here. If it gets up to there and is rejected, then the first target spot would be around about the 220 on. Okay, so that's the base case for a bullish momentum day. If we don't get that and then just continues to trade sideways, then I'd probably expect to see that we tag this point of control down here, which is from yesterday. Well, actually, okay, I need to probably just be careful here that I'm not confusing terminology. The chart that we're looking at here is a market profile chart. However, the numbers that I'm using here are point of control numbers as well. However, I'm only actually taking data from 8 o'clock European time. So technically, these numbers would be slightly different. So if I just go and add back in the Asian session, you'll notice that the numbers are slightly higher. The reason I do that, the reason I use the 8 o'clock numbers is because the overnight session doesn't have a huge amount of volume. It spends a lot of time trading, and obviously this is a time-based tool, but it doesn't spend a lot of volume here, so I don't tend to use those numbers to do my point of control calculations. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'm just going to change that back. There we go. All right. So an area to watch out would be this one, 149, and to the downside even further would be 13 and 20. All right. Okay, last couple of charts, and then we'll go and take a look at CFD. First one is the strategy. Now, I spent quite a lot of time talking to you guys about this in sessions and one-to-ones and online on Telegram and all sorts of bits and pieces. And I know that some of you trade it in different ways, and that's fine. Do it however you want to do it. But if we just take a look at the simple way of trading it, which is often the easiest one to get your head around, this is from the 10th. Now, of course, I didn't speak about this yesterday because I wasn't here in the morning. I couldn't. But this is from the 10th, and you'll see that price action started off bearish. You're immediately presented with a sell signal here, and would have done very well. There isn't really much more to say. And the way that you would trade that, I've talked about it time and time again, but I'll say the same thing another time. You wait for price action to turn blue from a neutral candle set, which is the kind of white and red. As soon as it turns, you've got a sell signal. You wait for that candle to close, and then it's a sell. You enter, and you would put your stop loss above the previous dot, somewhere around there. You enter as soon as that next candle opens, and you look for 4 to 1 on the money, somewhere down there. All right. Now this chart tool looks slightly different to my CFD one. Maybe the config settings are a little bit different. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. And that would have been the trade. You would have been ready to just leave that, set and forget it. You're looking to target down here at 910, hit, and what you would have done at the beginning of the trade is risked 1% of your account balance on that trade, and so if you hit your stop loss, you'd lose 1%, and your target would be 4 times that amount. So you'd be adding 4% to your account. So it doesn't matter what size your account is, it's all relative to that. There was an opportunity to add to the position if you were aggressive. Don't do that. Could if you wanted to. And there was another sell opportunity. over here as well, had you have missed this too. Fourth. Before the afternoon bias change happened, and the first signal was here, and again, you could have jumped in on that, and off you would have gone. And again, 4 to 1 is the idea. Get your stop loss below the dot, enter at the beginning of the next candle, look for 4 to 1. You risk 14 points, you end up with about 50. And yeah, use the strategy, guys. By all means, follow a signal, but there's no substitution for being able to replicate this yourself on your own charts. Get yourself Sierra charts. That's what I'm using here. It isn't free, it does cost, but you can get a 7-day free trial from Sierra charts. I'm not affiliated with them in as much that I don't work for them or anything like that. I just recommend them because they're good and I like them. You can obviously use whatever charting platform you like. If you want the one I use, it's Sierra charts. Right? And if you want to know more about that, send me a message on Telegram and I'll send you the links for all the tutorial videos that I've done that will enable you to download the free trial, get access to my configuration files, so your setup would look like my setup. And then if you want to have a trial of this strategy, then send me your username and I can do that for you as well. You'll need to be a subscription member to get ongoing access to the strategy, but I'll give you a trial, no problem. Okay, and for yesterday, a bit of an odd day. We had the spike above in the European Open. There would have been a failed signal here as price actually returned back to balance. Failed to break to the downside, so these sell signals also would not have worked out. There was a buy signal that gained some trickle momentum to the afternoon part of the session. And I was actually slightly unusual. Oh, I actually just realized that. Okay, forget me. I was about to say something about commenting on this price action here, but of course it's the overnight session. But I actually held a trade along into yesterday and spiked out and topped my target on this move here, so I was very pleased with that. Happy days. I don't often hold overnight, but sometimes when days are like you know, when it just sort of moves sideways in the afternoon session, quite happy to do that. All right, so we have got ourselves into a position where today we've already spiked on the European Open. We're in a bias, a bullish bias, neutral price action. Perhaps there's going to be some opportunities to get into some longs on the strategy. I won't talk through this strategy today. No, I think I'll save that for another day. So let's just jump ourselves over to the CFD charts and let's just look at these key numbers for you here. Okay, so the point of control is 142. We're already trading around the distribution range high, or the high basically of yesterday. We've got a couple of levels already marked out here, and these might be from previous points of control. But I'm going to go and jump over to the market profile chart where we can just see a little bit more easily. Let's just take a look at this. So you'll notice yesterday the initial balance was quite wide relative to the overall size of the profile. Okay, we had a mini range extension above and we had a mini range extension below, but there was no momentum on either side. And so price action created its value area in the top half of the initial balance, basically. The close was in the value area, the point of control was the value area, and the only real benefit here you can see is that the majority of the range was sat above the high previous day, which is often a bullish sign. But once we had this compression here and we broke out of that compression, again, often what you can do when you see these particular situations is measure the base. That will be the distance between these two. You can extend that, break, target. It actually overshot that target, but it's an easy way to create something. Met with quite heavy responsive buying, and price action returned back inside this compression zone, but we've now started to test the upside. So that's kind of comes back to that whole base case I talked about at the beginning of the video. which is where we could start to see a move up towards the higher volume zones of this horrible profile from the beginning of the month. That's what I'd like to see. DAX doesn't often care about what I like, but that's what I'd like to see. Now, I did have a question from Eamon about the FTSE chart. Eamon, if you're here this morning, you can hear this. I've just taken a quick look at UK 100 down here. It is open, it's responding, it's no problem, but you're saying that your current chart is locked. So if you have my configuration files up the top, just make sure that this button is not clicked. Right? It's the button that says lock. When it's locked, you'll notice that all the price action disappears when you move the chart. So you'll see that on the right hand side, the scale of, you can see that the market price action can sometimes still be moving, but you don't see price action. So just click and drag the chart all the way to the left, or press the end button on your keyboard and unclick lock. And hopefully that will sort it out for you. Okay. That is pretty much my thinking. There isn't a lot more to go into. I don't think we need to really drag it out any longer. So I'm going to probably leave a little earlier today. I'll go and get this sent out and published up. And thank you for spending your time joining me this morning. Rowan, thank you for confirming the sound. Hope you've all had a good session this week. If you are in the UK, I hope you've got your polling cards, your voting cards, and you're ready to get yourself out and cast your vote in another election. Make sure you do it. Don't sit at home if you're not sure. And yeah, for today, all about the strategy for me. Looking for some momentum. Need to be careful of my Forex trades. There have been quite a few that I've sent out this week. As in, yeah, lots. And some of them have been stopped out at break even. That's fine, it happens. But the pound ones are going to be very volatile, so I might even consider just doing half risk on a couple of those. But anyway, guys, I want to leave it there. Have a good day today, and we'll be back again tomorrow with another one and an update. Yeah, have a good one.